There's one thing that I found that most people have no game plan or the information in place in order to get ready for being on a podcast. That you probably want to get on podcast and maybe you've done it before, maybe you haven't. But what is a systemized way that you can make sure you have all the information necessary in order to get on stage? And this is not the extensive list, but I want to go through 10 things that you'll need that most likely any podcast guest, especially the more set up, more professional, somebody who's been doing hundreds of episodes already, they're going to be asking for this information. So we're going to go through this list today. So hopefully it will bring you some value. You'll enjoy this and go take action on that. The very first thing that I don't think I've ever been on a podcast that's never asked for this is a professional bio. Number one, professional bio. You want something that's short and sweet, 1 to 2 sentences, so they can introduce you for the podcast, but then also a longer bio so they have more information on you. You don't want to have a bio that's over 500 words long that they're going to read out. So that's why I always say something that's like 1 to 2 sentences, something short and sweet. I'm Philip. This is Philip Sessions, owner of Speaking Sessions. He's a husband, father, Christian, and he does public speaking coaching, something like that. Something very simple. It could be 1 to 2, 3 sentences, something like that, but short and sweet that the host can read off very quickly. And then that longer bio. So if they want to have something more professional, they put it on their website, they have something like that. So there's more information about you. But I like to have the 2 different bios so you can share both of them. The next thing is headshots. Some people do podcast promotion, some don't, but having a professional headshot is something you should have anyways, especially if you're trying to get on podcasts or trying to get on stages. You need to have that no matter what, and it'd be great for your social medias as well. So the second thing is that headshot. Make sure you have one that's really high quality, so it can be over 10 megabytes, but also have something that's a little bit less, because I've noticed when you upload to certain platforms for people that some will take over 10 megs, some won't. So make sure that you maybe have 2 versions, one that's just a smaller size, a smaller file size there. And that way you have good high quality, but also just in case, because I've been there, I'm like, okay, I don't have that. And I've went back and created that. So I have a lower resolution one or a smaller file size headshot as well to be able to kind of make sure I don't have to go and click and find something else, and it's not the ideal headshot for me. Number 3 is a 1-pager. This is going to be beneficial so you can be able to share that very quickly. You don't have to think, okay, what are these things that I want? But what is a 1-pager? A 1-pager entails having a summary of your expertise, the key topics that you can discuss on or that you talk about often, your contact information, and your social media links or handles, however you want to put those in there. But with these 4 things, that makes it where you can readily answer questions. And some people actually like that 1-pager. Some people in their intake form, they'll actually ask you these questions anyways. So this helps you be able to systematize getting on that podcast, because now you can go look at your 1-pager and you can just copy and paste rather than trying to, okay, what were my 3 key topics? Because let's be honest, we get on podcasts or we get on stages or life happens and we start thinking about something different, and now we tweak it just a little bit. But you as a speaker or a podcast guest, you want to be getting familiar with a couple of messages. You don't want to have 100 different messages that you've talked about. You may be passionate about it, you may love it, but you want to really get known for a couple of things. So that's why I like to use that 1-pager. So it's something structured for you so you can share that 1-pager simply, or in the intake form, you can then copy and paste those things such as your key discussion points, your expertise, and that way that host can get to know you a little bit better. Next thing, very similar, is your media kit. This will primarily be more for speaking on stage, but it's still something that could be beneficial to help you get ready for a podcast. But what is in that media kit? That media kit is going to have testimonials and endorsements. It's going to have press releases, previous media coverage, so other podcasts you've been on, if you've been in any kind of magazines or articles, things like that, where you've been somewhere that you've done something, so they can go and look at that media coverage. And then high resolution logos and branding for your business, for your brand, whatever that is. So you want to make sure you have those in there as well within that media kit. Now, the reason why this is important, and I say it's more towards the public speaking side, you getting on a stage versus a podcast, because now people can get to know your background. They can use your logos for things. And you could probably add headshots into this as well. I just didn't want to be redundant when it comes to the media kit, but you can have that in there so people can really see the credibility behind you, your brand, and your message. And that's why we have this media kit. But it's also something great to be able to share with your podcast host, so that way they can then take that and use that for things to be able to ask you questions about, to see your credibility, your background, and everything. Number 5, and this again kind of goes in with those media kits, is your previous podcast or media appearances. So whether it be YouTube or just be like an Apple link, you want to have several links of more recent stuff or things that were really popular, especially if you had a YouTube video that went over 1 million views. I would put that, even if that's a couple years old, still put that. But then you may put more recent stuff as well, because our messaging changes, we change, we look different as the years progress in our lives. So we want to make sure we have some more recent stuff as well, so they can go back and get a feel for who we are as a guest. What things are other people asking? Because some guests really like to dig into their guest and ask questions that they're not typically asked. Think about celebrities. When they're going on different podcasts, they're probably asked basically the same stuff. So if you want to be a unique host, you're going to try and ask unique questions. You're not going to ask the same canned questions that everybody else asks about their career, about what got them to where they're going. That's what everybody else is asking. So you want to be able to ask other things. And so having those links to previous appearances will help. Plus, again, it gives you that credibility that you've been somewhere, you've been doing things. This isn't your first rodeo, your first podcast. Number 6 is talking points. Have those talking points. This goes back to the one pager, but still, I like to have it in the one pager, but then I also have it handy somewhere separate as well. You can do one or both. Doesn't matter. It just depends on you. But really have those talking points, what that key message is, as well as questions that you've been asked before. Well, here's some common questions that a lot of people ask me, or my clients ask me, or things that I help my clients with if you're a coach, or here's some industry questions that typically get asked about what I do for work. This is going to be dependent on your industry, your service, your product that you do, but you can come up with key topics and the questions that are commonly asked around that to really help that host be able to ask you questions and be able, one, get to be able to know you better, your product, your service, but then also be able to ask good questions, because you're going on that podcast, of course, to share value, or I hope you're going to share value, but you're also on that podcast so you can get targeted with your message and reach new audiences. So you want to make sure they're asking questions, or hopefully asking questions that make you look even better. Number 7 is book or publication. So have you been in magazines, or do you have a book? I got my book over here, Mindset Over Motivation. But do you have a book? Are you an author? Or have you been published in any magazines, on articles, whatever that looks like? Have links to that, or give copies if you happen to be doing the podcast in person, where they have that, or send it to them ahead of time. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and send you my book if you want to take a look at that and read that, or let them know, hey, I've got this book, because that's a unique thing that they can look at. They can get to know you a little bit better, because when you're writing in a book, when you're writing in an article, you're talking in a completely different light than perhaps you're going to do on a video. They're going to see a little bit different side of you in these written forms versus the spoken forms of content that they've been seeing, listening, hearing, and everything. Number 8, your audio and video setup. Make sure that you've got great audio and video. This is something that you want to make sure of, because if you get that content back, you want to make sure it looks good. You don't want to have fuzzy, pixelated content if you're doing videos, or you don't want to have really muffled audio if it's just an audio-only podcast. So make sure that your equipment is good, because it's going to make you look professional also. There's plenty of options out there. Plenty of things on Amazon. You can get just a 1080 pixel webcam. You can get just a $100 mic. You don't have to spend a ton of money. You can even use your phone, set that up. If you have an iPhone or Android, you can set that up and use that as your webcam, even if you really don't want to spend the additional money. But find ways. And also with that, make sure you're on a laptop. Don't use an iPad or an iPhone. Yes, the way you connect your iPhone to the computer is one thing, but don't solely just use the iPhone, because that doesn't look professional. And then when you want to go repurpose that content, it's not going to be as good because the quality on the phone or the iPad is not near as good, and the resolution also isn't there as it would be if you're on a laptop or desktop. Number 9, an episode promotion plan. What are your plans when that episode comes out for you to promote it? Are you going to wait for them to tag you and then promote it? Hopefully you at least do that. But are you trying to find ways to also promote that podcast to help gain that popularity? Because when you're a guest and you show, hey, look, I took the time out to do this, that, you're not telling them this, but you took the time to do the extra promotion. You took the time to let people know that you were on this podcast. As you're promoting that person's podcast, it makes them feel better. And there's that law of reciprocity. They want to then get you in front of other people, because that guest experience is not only just for when you're in the moment, when you're in that podcast, it's before you get there. Do you make it easy for them to get the information? Are you there on time or even a little early? And do you promote the podcast afterwards? A lot of people don't promote the podcast, so have a plan for how you're going to help promote that episode that you're on. And then number 10, which goes in line with this, is your engagement plan. How do you plan to engage with that podcast? Some people, they don't have a great following, and that's okay. But are you adding a comment to when they tag you in the post? Are you adding it to your stories? Are you liking their post? If they have guests in there that are asking questions, or, oh man, this is awesome, thanks for sharing this episode, are you going back and commenting on that? Are you engaging with them and asking them, hey, do you have any questions? Would love to answer anything. What did you think about the episode? What was your favorite part? Just having some kind of engagement with those posts as well, again, makes you a better guest and makes more people want to have you on there. And kind of a bonus here, one thing I like to do when I'm a guest on podcasts, especially when the host is a gracious host, they did a great job, is I go and leave a review on their preferred platform. And I leave that 5-star review, give some feedback, or say, hey, this is an amazing podcast. Love the host is so great, the great value, whatever. You figure out how you're going to do that review, but do that on their episode or their podcast rather. That way the algorithm pushes up just a little bit, even just a little bit, because too many podcasts don't have those reviews, and it's important for that podcast to grow by getting that review. So these 11 things that I shared with you will really help you be able to be a better guest when it comes to podcasts. Let me know which one was your favorite and the one that you thought was the most valuable and maybe unique for you that you never heard of before.